G'day and thank you for watching another episode of Church and State with Dave Pellowe. I'm host of the show, Dave Pellowe, and joining me today from the headquarters in Canberra of the Australian Christian Lobby is Dr. Elisabeth Taylor. She's the Director of Research for the Australian Christian Lobby. Thanks for joining me, Elisabeth.
Hello, David. It's my pleasure.
Now, Elisabeth, you actually recently, at the end of last year, did an extensive amount of research for the Australian Christian Lobby on the Safe Schools program and discovered that an integral part of that program is something that's called gender theory or queer theory. What exactly is the background and the history of queer theory?
Queer theory has it grew out of feminist theory. So, and I was familiar with feminist theory because I studied women's studies at university. And what the feminists were interested in was the extent to which the differences between men and women are biologically set in stone and the extent to which they can be. So what is nurture? What is nature? That was really the essence of the debate that gave rise to this study of gender. So gender was the word feminist theorists used to describe those things that were socially constructed and attributed to women. So the reproductive capacities of women being slightly lighter build and shorter and all of those sorts of things. Those are physical, biological, set in stone differences between men and women. They can't be altered, but it doesn't necessarily follow from that women will be submissive or subordinate to men, or that they will be more nurturing, or all of those characteristics that are attributed by a society to men and women are called gender characteristics. And the feminist theorists were very interested in those because those are the things that can be changed. So, for example, we have, actually it's a trope that's as old as the hills, a gender stereotype, if you like, about women, that we cry and we talk. And these are things that have been said about women at least since the 14th century that I've come across. These are just gender stereotypes that are associated with femininity. With being a woman, you're going to be someone who cries and talks a lot more than if you're a man. And that's not, and the feminists wanted to challenge that and say, no, just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you're going to be more emotional than men. And these are the things that we can change and we can challenge. But as far as the feminists were concerned, these are the radical feminists from up until the early 90s. The radical feminists were still concerned with studying women as an oppressed class. And the oppression of women, according to these feminists, was still grounded in their biology. It was because women breastfeed, women get pregnant, women menstruate, women have children, women are the primary carers of young children. Those are the issues that are affecting women and that cause differences in their status. So the feminist theorists never regarded gender as something that was entirely separate from women. When women and men were still separate biological classes, and the oppression of women was still grounded in their biology. So they were interested in gender because you can reduce gender stereotypes, you can make the situation better for women, but they're still going to be women. Now, in the early 90s, that began to change, and particularly with queer studies programs that grew out of women's studies programs in universities. And what queer theory was interested, or queer studies programs were interested in studying queer communities, so transgender communities, homosexual communities, and they were interested in how gender operated in those circumstances. So, for example, you might have a male homosexual couple in which one of them identifies as the wife. Now, clearly he's not physically female, but he might be the receptive sexual partner. He might be subordinate in terms of the power structures in that particular relationship. And so he's assuming a feminine role within that relationship. Even though he's biologically male, he doesn't think he's a female. There's none of that aspect of it comes into it, but he's assuming the social role of a woman, and so he would call himself the wife. And I've met various couples like this. So this was the way that queer studies of gender really differed from feminist studies. We're now looking at the feminine role completely divorced from the feminine body. And of course, when you throw transgender experiences into the mix as well, then you'll get people who are biologically male but believe themselves to be female and are adhering to various gender norms in order to affirm that feeling of being female.
So you're talking about transgenderism now, people that think they're actually born in the wrong body as opposed to just taking a different gender role in a homosexual relationship.
Yeah, that's right. So in a homosexual relationship, you'll get a man who knows he's a man, but he's operating as the wife in a particular relationship. But there's no other gender confusion there. Mm-hmm. But then you'll get transvestites who also believe that they're men but like to dress as women, or the other way around. And then you get transgenderism, where people, so a biological man, for example, might actually believe that his subjective gender identity is that he's actually a woman, mm-hmm. And that's what we call transgender. So when you study all of that theory, and this is where the feminist concept of gender really got stretched until it developed into a different idea of gender, and that was really enunciated by Judith Butler, who is a lesbian post-structuralist philosopher who's interested in queer studies. And she came up with what she calls the theory of performativity. So the theory of performativity is where gender is a free-floating artifice. It's completely separate from biology.
It's got nothing to do with your genitals, what's between your legs. Gender Absolutely. Is something you get to choose?
Absolutely. It's entirely constructed, and it's performative. Not set in stone, so it's continually changing. It's fluid, but her idea is that being a man or a woman isn't something that you are, it is something that you do. And so in this theory, really the gender identity in your head, or the way you like to dress, or the social norms that you accept, or the stereotypes that you identify with, those become more real and more important to your identity than your biology.
And does she speculate on any age of reason where a child, an adolescent, or an adult is actually at a capacity to decide this, or does she not go into that much detail?
As far as I know, she didn't recommend it for primary school children. It was really just a culture, an analytical construct, a way of understanding how queer communities operate. And if you were using it to analyse and to study queer communities, then it makes sense. This is a useful analytical tool. As a theory for how the real world is, that's taking a step away from where Judith Butler was really going with it.
Okay.
Not to say that she wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but she wasn't saying that this is how the whole... Well, I think it makes sense in the context of queer communities. When you take it out of the context of queer communities and you apply it to the whole world, including the heterosexual world, and where everybody's, perfectly happy being a man or a woman, then I think you begin to run into problems and limitations with how useful queer theory is as a way of explaining that world.
Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.